Hi, today we are going to discuss about bandwidth control on Zscaler internet access. Today's business app require you to manage bandwidth demands, to prioritize business applications, better user experience, and reduce cost and simplify IT infrastructure. Zscaler bandwidth control allows you to preserve access to your business critical applications regardless of your internet pipe consumption. This enables you to do things like adding more restrictive rules around social media and streaming media. For example, allocate YouTube and capped with 30 percentage, Office 365 guaranteed 40 percentage, and so on. Bandwidth control has two levels. One is at location level, configuring the bandwidth on the location itself when you are creating the trusted location, maybe GRE, IPsec, or known location where you put maximum download and upload bandwidth. So this is applicable for sub locations as well. You can configure the same bandwidth control for uh, sub locations as well. The second level is you can configure bandwidth shaping rules based on the bandwidth classes such as web conferencing URL, VoIP, URL categories or application classes that you can define. You can define the bandwidth classes and apply that particular rules into the bandwidth control policies. There are two criteria you predominantly um, applied for bandwidth control. One is upload, another one is download. So this criteria is configured under the locations. Upload is to limit the bandwidth used to send data out of a location, and download is nothing but limit bandwidth for downloading. Time of the day, you can protect bandwidth during peak usage times. Application classes you can define, and you can apply that classes into the policies, bandwidth control policies to limit them. Limit the bandwidth used for specific type of categories like shopping, social media, streaming media, etc. And you can put your application controls over there. And bandwidth controls are two types. One is minimum reserved bandwidth and maximum allocated bandwidth. When you are defining a bandwidth control, this applies for the policies HTTP and HTTPS from the locations. You do not need to enable SSL inspection because it work at TCP level. This is a typical example of bandwidth control policies. You may have multiple bandwidth control policies, and in each policy action, you could see the minimum and maximum bandwidth allocated. So here in the bandwidth control, you are defining the sales and support apps, and the bandwidth minimum should be 40 percentage and the maximum in 100 percentage. Streaming media bandwidth minimum will be 40 percentage, 10 percentage, and maximum will be 40 percentage. What does it means? In if there is any contention happens, the bandwidth will be ensures 40 percentage all the times for sales and support apps, streaming media for 10 percentage, and large files for 10 percentage. The minimum bandwidth should not be exceed 100 percentage. Okay. The maximum bandwidth is work in a fashion like if the minimum bandwidth is allocated for all the policies, then the rest of the bandwidth will be allocated for the whoever is needed the bandwidth. It will again comes from the top to bottom. Uh, Based on the bandwidth policy that you are written on the Zscaler console, Zscaler will distribute the bandwidth to each role from top to bottom by looking at the minimum bandwidth first. If the condition happens, the very first time it will look only the minimum bandwidth. Once that bandwidth allocation is completed, it will pass through the each rule second time to allocate the remaining bandwidth and distribute it maximum bandwidth configuration. In summary, service applies bandwidth control to traffic from known locations only, that is locations that are configured on the ZIA admin portal, and Zscaler service applies to policy to all HTTP and HTTPS traffic from the location, not for all other traffic. So in this case, if your corporate have web-based traffic and non-web-based traffic, you have to reserve some bandwidth for the non-web based traffic uses. So for an example, if your corporate having 100 Mbps bandwidth, then you have to leave certain bandwidth for your other traffic. Say example, web based traffic will be 75 percentage and um, will be used, and the remaining 25 percentage will be used for non-web traffic, which includes your bandwidth overhead header and etc etc. You do not need to enable SSL inspection because it works at the TCP level. Minimum bandwidth specifies the guaranteed minimum bandwidth percentage that is available for the bandwidth class. And once the minimum bandwidth is allocated, then the maximum bandwidth specifies the maximum percentage of the total bandwidth that based configured bandwidth class can be at a given point in time. So all the bandwidth control policies will run two times. First time to allocate the minimum bandwidth, and the next time we'll look at the bandwidth to allocate the second level of bandwidth. That is maximum bandwidth. Uh, That's it today. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.